Yes. Hi, Christian. Now you can introduce yourself.
Hi, Eli. Yeah, thank you. Well, to introduce myself, basically, I have been working for many years as engineer. Worked at Nokia, if you remember, the mobile phones. Don't know if anybody still uses those, but
Oh,
yeah.
I had those brick phones. I had like three or four of them for sure. I'm old enough to
I,
remember. Great phones.
I joined back right after the iPhone came, and I was
Oh,
in
the
a team
decline.
building some applications. I think for the N, we had those Symbian phones, N9. I think was it N9
The full
or
keyboard ones?
whatever. I had those with Linux and keyboard, and they had like N8 was the last Symbian, and I had the N97 Mini, whatever was the last Symbian with keyboard. It was a disaster, but yeah,
Yes, it
um,
was. I had one too.
it was fun.
Well,
It
back in
was
the
fun
day,
times.
back in the day, the fact that you could type like a full thing. I had a 97 and I was traveling in Europe actually. In like I did the Tour de Mont Blanc in France, and I was learning French. I was trying kind of to figure French out, and I had a dictionary, which for the time was like, oh, that like today it's you point it at something and it just translates. But back in the
Yeah,
day, even being able to translate a word with your phone was quite amazing. Yeah, we've come a long way. Hasn't been that
yeah.
long. It's like maybe I don't know, 13, 14 years, 15
I
years maybe.
I joined Nokia. I joined Nokia in 2010, so it's like
Right.
13 years.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and that didn't really last long. So after a year and a half or so, they shut down that part. At least the office where I've been. That was in Romania, and then I moved to Berlin, 2011, in the fall, and I moved to a different part of Nokia that was doing this mapping software, and they're still running things. And if you buy a car, chances are their navigation in the car comes from them. It's called Here Technologies nowadays. It came
Oh,
from
really?
another
Because
company.
I have that on my phone. It's the kind of the offline map thing.
Yeah,
It's pretty cool actually. And that's Nokia?
it used to be Navtec, and then Nokia bought it just to put it on the phones as a differentiator from the iPhone at the time, because they were trying to compete with the iPhone. Um,
Good luck with that.
and yeah, and eventually they got to Windows Phone and so on. So, but basically um, they were trying with this map software, and basically I was in charge of the infrastructure at some point of this website companion of that mobile app.
Mhm.
And we were actually working very closely with the team who built that mobile app with a map. Here we go. It's nowadays called. Um, and yeah, basically that was doing this infrastructure stuff. And at some point we started to use AWS, and I got pretty deep, and I liked it a lot when it came to like what you can do with it, and soon started to build things for AWS. And there was at some point we started, so Nokia was trying also to sell this part of the business after they sold the mobile phones to Microsoft. They wanted to sell this, and they eventually sold it to the German car makers. So then when they were about to sell it, there was this effort of cost optimization. So everybody was like tasked to look into their costs and see how they can make it more cost efficient, and so on. So I started that it was around 2014, 15. And that's kind of how I first discovered this thing called spot instances in AWS. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but
A little
basically
bit.
it's capacity that nobody uses at the moment, and you just can purchase it as at a pretty steep discount was at the time, so it could be up to 90%.
It can disappear without notice, right? The whole point
yeah.
is like you get it, but it's not guaranteed to run. It's like good for CI, for stuff like that you don't actually need to
Right.
any guarantees around.
Yeah, so we set this up in one of our dev environments. It was actually the Windows Selenium cluster, which was we were using that to hit the website, the mapping application website, and run our tests against it.
Yeah. Oh, right.
But,
so exactly the kind of pipeline I had in mind, because CI
yeah, so
is what
it was a dev environment for sure. We didn't run the production on at the time with this. And then after a few, I don't know, weeks, months, it just went away. The entire capacity was lost and the thing went down, and we kind of reverted back to on demand. And that was kind of where I started to think about what I could do to make it more reliable. And then I joined this meetup. I was very active in the Berlin meetup scene, and I'm still at the moment. We had just started this AWS meetup in Berlin at this company. So we were the founders, my colleagues were the founders of this meetup, and I joined the first few meetups. And there was this meetup, and at the end of it, somebody mentioned that there are some new API calls for auto-scaling groups, and you could just run attach, detach actions. And what if somebody would run a spot instance and attach it to an existing group and detach the instance from the group? And basically, I don't know who got the idea, but I just went home and started to build this. I tested it manually first, and then I built automation for this.
So basically, you have in a group, you have a permanent instance, and then you kind of have a rotating spot instances to add capacity, but you never completely run out of servers in the group, right? That's
basically that was the idea. Like you would have the group remains as on demand, so you don't change the group configuration, and then if there is capacity for spot, there is this cron job. I mean, it was just a cron job at the time, written in Lambda. It's a long story, but I decided to write it in Lambda just so I learned Lambda, and using the Go programming language just so I learned the Go programming language, and I released it as open source around 2016, because at the time there was really like the integration, the native integration from AWS was pretty poor. You could just define a single instance type in the group, and if that happened to have no capacity, you were like dead in the water. So what I did with this cron job was I would provision the capacity and iterate over all the available instance types. In case there was no capacity for the first, I would try with the second, and so on. And with all the instance types available, you would always pretty much get something. I mean, we had like a limit between the size of the initial instance and not more expensive than the initial instance cost. So there was like a window of compatibility.
You can go lower though, yeah. Cheaper and flimsier.
Yeah. Neat. So you got this this replacement logic happening in your account, and all your capacity would become much cheaper. And in case it's broken, like in case there's no capacity, the group will spin up something from the launch configuration. And this apparently was worked out pretty well. And a lot of people started to use it. I started to get first few contributions to the project. I mean, I released it as open source under MIT license. And I didn't really care about making money out of it. I was happily employed at, they had already started, they had already sold that part. The Here Technologies, it was sold. I was happily employed there. And then next year, after we got some nice growth in the open source project, yeah, I see this startup from the US who somehow built a very similar product, and it really turned out they took my open source code and built a product around it. And then I was like, okay, maybe I can try to monetize this. I relicensed the code from MIT to whatever, OSL 3, I think. And basically I kept working on open source, but I tried to monetize it as maybe open source support. It was kind of still as a side thing next to my employment. So it was like, yeah, I had a few $100 coming from people, and I started to sell binaries that I had tested. So that was my monetization, like just sell something. It didn't really got much money because people were just running the open source for free. Why would you pay for something? But yeah, the testing part, there were a few dozens, like a dozen or so people who got to pay for it. I got around, I think it was $500 at the peak. But then I was like, okay, I wanted to go full time on this, but didn't get any traction. I mean, not enough traction. I didn't really do any marketing for it, and was like, yeah, I kind of gave up on monetization. And then I
Yeah,
get
it
this
sounds
job
like
offer from.
it sounds like your open source project took off on its own. It's like it's you know, I talk to a lot of founders. Things taking off by themselves is everybody's dream. It is extremely rare for that to happen, that things just kind of magically by themselves, even to the extent that you have, which is like a $500 monthly income from a project that you didn't do any marketing with, is quite significant.
Yeah,
Because I've had you know, plenty of opportunities working with people for months to get to $100 MRR, and a lot of sweat, blood, and tears to get there in marketing, right? Not in building. So that's really cool.
I mean, the story is a bit longer. So when I started, I put it on Patreon, and I had this guy who gave me for like half a year $5 a month, and then I was like, okay, maybe I can start to do something more, and I offered the stable builds, and that's kind of when it kind of took off, and it went from 5 to 500 in a few months. But then it kind of stalled at 500. It just stalled, and whatever I did, I couldn't get it any further. And it turned out that AWS had started to improve on the integration themselves. But that's kind of roughly at the time when I joined AWS, because I got this job offer after I failed to increase it further. I was like, okay, I got a job offer and I joined, and it was completely different doing like security controls for banks. But then in AWS, a lot of people knew me. Apparently, I was well known within the spot service team, and a lot of people from there contacted me and got me in conversations with customers and with the service team, like how to improve the service and so on. So I was
interesting.
already
From Amazon itself.
Yeah. I joined. And then they kind of.
Oh, you joined. So you got a job offer from AWS, from Amazon.
Yeah.
And did you get the job offer because of your open source work? Was that related in any way, or was that like random?
It was random. It was in a different part of the company that was just doing security for banks, pretty much setting up the bank.
Got you. I thought it was a different company. Oh,
cloud.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very serendipitous.
Yeah, but then I switched after about a year in that role. I switched to the spot service team, and I got much more like deeper into this part as within AWS. So I got like to see how they improved the service afterwards. I mean, for the first year, I didn't really do much on this application, and even afterwards, it kind of became a conflict of interest situation for a while, and I stopped any marketing and stopped working on it, on building. So basically, that was kind of what got me like kind of to pretty much halt everything. But I had those $500 people, like a few people giving me money. I just couldn't promote it any further, and it kept running for 2 more years until I left AWS. So basically, I was At AWS, I was specially solution architect for Spot, and then I got to cover also this Graviton CPU. So I was like the kind of the main technical person for these things in Germany, but for a while also across EMEA until we hired some more people. And yeah, that was kind of my role there. I just helped people run and get Spot reliably from like people from the biggest customers we had. Yeah, and then when I was in that role, I really realized how much bigger my software adoption had been. I mean, I cannot give any numbers, but it was like a significant percentage of all the total Spot capacity had been at the time launched with my tool, with my little open source tool. And
Right, so you
yeah,
didn't track, you didn't know. Like the only thing you can do in GitHub, you get some stars, you get some forks, and that gives you a kind of a rough estimate. But the actual usage might be 10 times higher or 100 times higher, and you wouldn't know.
yeah, it was more than. I mean, I cannot give actual numbers, but it was a significant percentage of the total Spot capacity, non-negligible
Wow.
at the time. And one of the top 3 or so customers was using this. They appeared on stage at this reInvent conference, which is running right now this year. But back in one of those years, they appeared on stage and they said how quickly they adopted this technology, but they were not allowed to mention the tool that they used. And apparently they used my tool. So yeah, it was
a missed marketing opportunity.
right.
Why couldn't they mention the tool they were using?
I mean, because it was not supposed to be promoted on stage as a non AWS product or something like that. I don't know. And right before I joined AWS, I actually had this thing. I had a chat with one of these the main podcasts in AWS. I don't know if you know Corey Quinn. And I was about to show up in his podcast. And it just was postponed until after I had joined AWS. And then after I joined, I couldn't join because I didn't get approval from PR. And it was like really, yeah. So that was another missed marketing thing. Yeah. So, but yeah, it was interesting times. And so basically, after a few years in that role, I was like, okay, I saw the economy going down last year already. And I was like, okay, now maybe it's another good time for me to give this another try. And I left AWS. And for the next 6 months or so, I continued working on this software. Surprisingly, many of those people who had paid for it from before I joined AWS, they remained paying users throughout all that time, like 3 years. So it was really sticky when it comes to user base. And I thought, yeah, I quit, and now it will be very quick for me to ramp it up. And I did had some growth. I mean, I spent the next half a year trying to kind of grow it and improve it and sell it and so on. And basically it grew, but still not enough to cover my expenses. And then this year in April, May, there was a huge increase in the spot prices. And especially in one of the regions. And the first 3 of my biggest users completely switched away from Spot and adopted the other mechanism, savings plans, to optimize the costs. So then I lost like all my revenue growth pretty much in these 6 months. Just completely was
So you
was
left
lost.
your you left your AWS job, looking at your revenue, thinking, oh, this is really sticky, I'd be able to grow it. And
Yeah.
then over the next few months, it actually shrinked.
It grew for a while, and then it completely cut in half, like
That
suddenly
sucks.
within a
That
few
sucks
weeks.
because you are in a way competing with AWS, right? They have their own way to offer. So they're amortizing the costs, right? They're bringing the spot cost up, and you mentioned they have the savings plan, which is like take some of the
Well,
benefit away.
it's not like direct competition. So they do have a product that they improved this integration with auto scaling groups. So they added like multiple instance type support sometime throughout my employment there. So I saw that happening, and I was like, okay. I mean, I already had the same, and then after I left, I did a few more improvements, making it even more reliable than the initial groups that you have. But yeah, that was the kind of the thing. What happened was this price increase was just because so many people now are doing cost optimization, and many of them, they started to use spot instances, and the spot instances are a marketplace. So basically, when people use more of it, the demand increases, the
And
supply
then
is
the
kind
price
of the
goes up.
same.
Yeah.
So the price goes up. Yeah. So that's kind of what happened. The price went up naturally because of more people just using this.
Which is
And
also a natural
like,
consequence of your project, right? Like because it's
well,
one of the ways people are using spot instances is using your project, which increases the usage, and then it increases the price, which also makes it harder to
yeah.
cost optimize using that approach.
Yeah, but then it's not just, I'm not the only way to do this. So there are many other alternative projects doing this. I mean, not necessarily open source, but like competitor products, um, commercial ones, plus the AWS native offering. And then also AWS offered something recently for Kubernetes users, um, which also ate a bit of my customer base. So some of my customers who use Kubernetes, a couple of them
Right now,
switched to
there's
that one because it's like natively integrated in Kubernetes. So I mean, I'm not competing with that, and that's also open source from AWS. But I'm kind of in the auto scaling group space. I'm like competing with the native offering, and like a bit enhancing the way you adopt it. You can adopt it with less effort, and it's also more reliable when it comes to like loss capacity. When the capacity goes away, I do failover to on demand, and also with diversification for that, as I do diversification for spot. And there's also like this sorting of instance types by generation. So I give you a newer instance type um, than what you could get. But yeah, but that's kind of so it's like
yeah.
it's no
Let's
longer
let's
it,
let's switch to the marketing bits.
yeah.
And what's because you did talk a little bit about what's going on, and you had early on, it was an arbitrage there was a cheap thing that nobody was using, and it was cheap and bad, and you made it cheap and bad, you made it slightly more expensive and much better, and over time that gap was closed by AWS, by
Mm-hmm.
other competitors, or like the um basically it's the business opportunity shrunk over time because
Yeah,
things have, like, other people have adapted to this, and AWS has adapted to this. So where does this leave you today with your business, and what the
yeah.
challenges right now?
Well, so basically, what I did afterwards, after I kind of killed by this price increase. I mean, not I don't blame it, but yeah, uh, it's kind of my fault of not being able to predict that this would happen. So after that, I was like, okay, what do I do now? I hope I have all these skills on cost optimization. And what I did, I just started to ask people if they are interested in getting help on optimizing their costs. So from May onwards, I started to get companies who running in the cloud, and I'm like helping them looking at their cloud infrastructure, trying to reduce their costs. And throughout the summer, I had a few of these engagements, and enough to see like patterns in their accounts. Basically, my model is entirely based on savings. So the more money I can save them, the more money I get.
You get you take a percentage of the savings, something like that.
Yeah. So basically, the way it works is I go to their account and I see, okay, we start from this amount of money per month, and then let's see how much we can decrease. And every month until we get diminishing returns, I charge half of the savings each month. But this month would be like maybe first month could be, let's say I saved them 5K. We do 50-50 on that. Second month, maybe I can save 2 more K. So we do 50-50 on the 5 and 2 more. So it's like incremental. And then at some point we stop. We can stop at like 2-3 months. We don't really go further, at least not so far from the engagements I had. But then I also charge 3 more months at 50% just to capture a little bit of this like tail of savings that they will get forever. So that's kind of my billing model so far, just charging for the duration of the work.
It's a nice model. It's a little complicated to explain, maybe, like compared to this is going to cost you $3,000 and that's it, or something like that, or it's 50% of the savings for 6 months.
It's kind of the same.
It's kind of the same. I'm just saying, like when you make an offer, like when you write out a contract where you talk to a person and you're trying to close a sale, if it's like, look, this is like you pay nothing up front, or maybe you pay a little bit of a commitment fee, and then it's 50% of whatever I'm able to save on your account for 6 months. And that's it. That's like a lot easier. And it's based on your knowledge on when do things typically stop improving.
Yeah, that's actually good. I will improve my offer based on this. Thank you.
Yeah, because if you're like, well, it usually takes about 3 months until I can't improve any longer, and I want 3 extra months afterwards. Well, this is a 6 months contract. That's it. And then they can predict the costs, right? They're like, well, if we spend, let's say, I don't know, 20K a month on AWS, and we expect you, or you tell them, listen, I usually can take it down 50%. And 50% of that is something they're going to pay you. Well, it's $2,500 times 6, which is something you can put in your budget. Something they can put in their budget is like, okay, we can, like, this makes sense. And it's something you can put in your budget is like, okay, I have some predictability in how this business works in terms of cash flow.
That's actually good. I focused on startups so far, so especially startups who are running out of the free credits, because that's kind of when they get to see the first bills, it's like a bit of a shock for them. And at that point,
that's so awesome, because it is a running out of free credits is like, it's a specific point in time. There's urgency there. So, from a marketing or sales perspective, look, if you're going to run out of free credits in 3 months, then suddenly you're going to have like a $10,000 or $20,000 bill on your hands. You need to hire me now because this takes time. That's a really cool way to frame it.
Yeah, the problem is they don't really have money, so they're like desperate for the savings. But yeah, they're a bit reluctant to pay money.
Yeah.
So I've been actually trying to figure out ways. I mean, yeah, it's always hard to get money from the poor, but
Yes,
yeah,
really
it's
bad
kind of
idea.
what I do is getting this from these startups, helping them reduce their costs. And
I gotta ask though, why startups? Like, there's no
because
reason why you wouldn't be able to work on accounts that spend $1 million a month on AWS.
yeah, for sure, it's just that if you look at those, I didn't really have the luxury to wait half a year to close an enterprise deal. So I was like, okay, I need something quick, and startups are hungry and desperate.
Are faster, like on yeah.
Yeah, and like the next day, I'm in the account doing things, and yeah, that's kind
Sure.
of my idea was to speed up the closing time. But yeah, I mean, it's yeah, it has advantages and disadvantages. The advantage of the enterprise would be that they have much deeper pockets, and then but that they will take much longer to close the
So
deal,
wait a
and they
second.
are like,
This is really interesting because your main offer is to reduce costs. Reducing costs is really valuable when you're spending money. Reducing costs is not as valuable when you're not spending money, but only expect to start spending money. So if a company is spending 10, 20, $50,000 a month, and you say, I'm going to save you 50% of that over like 6 months, and you're going to pay me back 25, but then the rest of the savings is yours, that's a no-brainer deal because they only make money or save money on it. Like, even after paying you, even throughout the 6 months, they're still saving money. Like, there is zero out-of-pocket expense. They're only saving money. It's like, it's a beautiful offer. And for companies that are approaching the end of their free credits, they actually need to take some money out of pocket and pay you, which is not a no-brainer. So in the space between these companies, these startups who have just started up and are still using the free credits, and like you say, the enterprise where a sales cycle takes 6 months or a year, which, by the way, in this kind of thing, I don't think it should take that long. Savings is you just need to tweak it to the end of quarter. So when they are aware of their expenses and not just in the middle somewhere. Actually, December could be a really nice sales month for you for that reason, because that's when people tally up all of their expenses. Like, oh my God, we spent like $1.5 million on AWS this year, which is a lot, but it's still not a huge company, right? So like a startup that's not 6 months, that hasn't been operating for 6 months, but has operating for like 2 years, may have tens or sometimes hundreds of thousands of expenses a month on AWS, depending on how they've grown their customer base. And sometimes not even that. Sometimes people pay that, for scale of free products out of their VC funds, which is another angle, because they are running out of money, right? They're not making that money, they're running out of it. So for them, a cost savings thing is very similar to the logic of running out of free credits, because VC money is equivalent to free credits. Once you run out, you need to raise more. That takes 6 months. Founders can't do anything, and so on and so forth. So cost savings is kind of important in that stage too. And if they are paying a lot of money on a monthly basis, then your offer becomes that much more compelling.
Yeah, I think the challenge is with the startups who have a ton of VC money, they don't really care about the costs, until they are almost run out of that money. So it's like they have to be at a position that everything kind of aligns, where like
it also sometimes happens when a startup hires like a CFO or someone who actually looks at the money, because early on it's just
Yeah.
two guys writing code, then they get some engineers, and maybe they get some other kind of help, whatever, QA support, DevOps. And at some point, it's like, oh, okay, we have a lot of money flowing in and flowing out, and we have no idea what's going on here. We need a CFO or part-time CFO. And then the money guy comes and is like, oh my guys, you're nuts. We need to start cutting costs here. And so just from like an outreach perspective, a CFO that joined a startup recently, like within the last 6 months, this is like a thing you can, this is a query you can do on LinkedIn, right? You can just go into it and say, oh, I'm looking for CFOs who joined a company in the last 6 months, and the company is under 200 employees or something like that. And the sector is tech, right? It's like, oh, okay.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah, right. Because like, and the interesting thing is, because you're like on the technical side of things, the natural approach is to reach out to the technical people in the company. But from a business perspective, you're a cost savings guy, which, by the way, is really cool, because you, like, for almost 40 minutes, you talked about the technical details of how you do this. But when you start, is like, I do cost saving for AWS, and I find this really awesome, because you're obviously a very deep tech guy, but you have enough kind of business clarity to know that you should not be talking about that you should be talking about money. So, and if you're talking about money, the person you need to be talking about money is the person who is in charge of the money. So it could be the CEO, but the specific situation where a company has a CFO join is a point in time where they start looking at expenses.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's easier to track, as you said, with such a query. There's not such easy to track. Maybe there is, but maybe not that I know of when did they get these free credits. So I could go and talk to the CEO.
Exactly. Unless you have contacts in at AWS, and you can get like a list.
No.
You can't.
No. Even if I had, I wouldn't use that. It's not. But yeah. Anyway, interesting. Yeah, I wanted to mention a bit about the enterprise world, because there I think it's worth a bit talking about why I'm not talking to those people. I actually had a conversation with one of them, and when I told them that I'm charging based on savings, they were kind of intrigued, because they just expect people billing hourly or daily rates, and then it somehow just fizzled out, and they kind of ghosted me afterwards. I don't know what went on. Could be that they just had some approval challenges or whatever, but they just stopped answering. And
sometimes companies disappear, people get fired. Like, it's not, you can't judge based on a single instance. But the fact that they had an expectation to pay you hourly or daily, and your model was based on results, I really think you should have little trouble to sell to enterprise as well. Because of this, it's completed, like, there is no approval cycle for cost savings. It's not, but like, they don't need to allocate budget for that. They're going to be freeing up budget from the same department that you're going to be paid by. Therefore, there's no new money.
Right. No, it's actually the problem is these are different cost centers in enterprise. So you have the cost center of the cloud people who pay the cloud, and then there is the HR cost center. Basically,
oh, you're not HR. You just need to frame yourself as a cloud service. You need to go into the same budget line where they pay for cloud services. Absolutely. Absolutely. The
Okay.
name of your company should be something cloud services. So they can put it in the budget under that. It's like, oh, there's AWS and there's something cloud optimization services, and it's just a thing that is part of their cloud costs. Because if you
It's
get
the same.
into the
Yeah.
HR costs, then yeah, they need to pay you hourly or monthly, but you don't charge that.
Mhm.
You're like a bill of the thing. So
Actually, it's exactly like that for the marketplace. So when you put things on the AWS marketplace, it shows on the AWS bill.
exactly. Wait a second. Can you
So I
put your
could,
service on the AWS marketplace?
I think I could. I tried, but nobody seemed interested.
No,
Like
that's not. I don't mean that people would buy it off the marketplace. I mean from a billing and budgeting perspective. Imagine you're talking to an enterprise customer and you say, no, it's just a line in your AWS bill. You just install this thing, which is just the front end. I'm doing the work manually, but or you don't even have to tell them that. And that's it. It just appears on your AWS bill. Nothing happens financially except that your costs drop. That's it.
Mhm.
So you don't need any approval. You basically don't even need to talk to any decision-making people, any kind of money decision-making people at the company. You can have that agreement with like a low-level infrastructure team lead. That's it. Like you don't need to go
Yeah,
higher.
yeah. When I was in touch with them, at some point they asked me, um, how much will it cost? I was like, yeah, I
It
couldn't
doesn't.
tell them any numbers,
Yeah, but if you
but
if
yeah,
if you combine the ideas that we talked about, it's going to be 50% for 6 months, out of which 50% of the savings, which usually is about a quarter of your total cost or whatever the actual numbers are, is going to be for 6 months. It's just you just install an AWS app from the marketplace. I do the work, nothing happens. The only thing that
hmm,
happens is your costs get reduced. You don't need budget for that. You don't need approval for that. You don't need anything for that. I
okay,
don't see why
fair
you
enough.
wouldn't be able to take. I don't see why you wouldn't be able to take hundreds of thousands of dollars uh, projects.
Yeah,
And then it becomes a completely different problem. You probably need to train more people to do that, so you can scale. But
yeah. Actually, I've been trying to do that, to do that, because I as after I stopped focusing on the tools and offering more services. Basically, I started to do more of the service sales and started to find people. Um, and right now, I'm actually fully booked for the. I just signed a new one, uh, literally yesterday, and I'm like fully booked for the next couple of months probably. Um, so yeah, it's a thing that I've been considering. How do I scale? And one thing I'm kind of reluctant is hiring people as like an agency. I don't really feel like managing people, and really resonate with what you said earlier. I think on one of um, your podcasts, or was it this recording that you had a few weeks back, with these free agents, free individuals, freelancers, kind of working
yeah,
together. Um, and I've been contemplating on that, and trying to figure out some way for me to scale without hiring. And somebody from my connections called this. I actually mentioned it on LinkedIn, and somebody said this would be like a cooperative, which is apparently a thing. I was thinking more like a franchise. I would give my tools and know-how, um, to a bunch of people who are doing the same thing and in the same model, like the same cost savings model and the same kind of work that I do. So I would train them exactly what I
and
do,
and
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 then I
charge a
would
percentage of that. Yeah.
get a percentage. Yeah. Um, So that's kind of what I've been thinking. But
It's either
so far,
you basically have two options here, since you don't want employees, and I totally agree with that. You have the option of going the franchise model, or you have the option of you being the source of sales. So you become,
I
because you have both the technical skills, but you also have the reputation that allows you to get clients. So not everybody can claim to also have like a popular open source project for cost savings, and to have worked at AWS. There's like a lot of things you can use that are part of your reputation to close sales, where other people who maybe have the same skills can't. So one option is, every branch does their own sales and they do their own thing. The other option, which I think is much easier, is you find people who are technically skilled but can't sell shit, and then you do the sales,
yeah,
they do the work, and you get a much bigger piece of the pie, and but everybody's happy.
yeah. It was the thought was to do both. So both the franchise that would also include the projects. So
Mm-hmm.
they would get projects, tools, and know-how in exchange for a cut of their revenue, and being part of the network and getting more of these over time. Yeah, that was kind of what I've been thinking. But yeah, so far I'm just at capacity. So my sales hasn't really got to the point where I actually need more people. But
Well,
I
that
totally see that.
it goes the other way around, right? You first need to offload some of what you're already doing, so that you can free up yourself to work on the business and not in the business, and then you can scale. Because otherwise, you basically are a consultant maxed out and paid for your time. You have a little more
Yeah,
leverage than
okay.
usual because you don't get paid for hours or days, but you still have um, a limited capacity.
That's actually a fair point. So I actually should find help.
Before you have more
Okay.
capacity, because you won't be able to increase your capacity because you need to sell more, and you don't have time to do that. So you actually need to
Right.
offload that and lose some revenue doing that, obviously, so that you can grow. You can't. Yeah.
Actually, that's a great insight. I've been actually thinking to like, okay, I'm now at capacity, and if I get more project in the meantime, I will get more people to help me.
Yeah.
But then if I spend more time trying to do sales and find customers, I'd actually force. I mean, I would have this happen earlier.
Yeah, exactly. All right.
Yeah, cool.
Cool. Perfect. Well, very happy to finally meet you. This was awesome. We've been following each other on Twitter for such a long time, and we tried to get together a few times, and time and schedule
Yeah,
was always difficult, but
I'm also happy about it.
awesome.
So yeah, thank you, Eli.
Thank you. All right. I'll see you online. Bye bye.
Yeah, thanks you too. Bye.